Hola, muy buenas, espero que estéis todos bien. Ahora os voy a presentar un interesante libro que se llama DSM, ¿de acuerdo? Aunque he hablado en alguna otra ocasión sobre él, creo que la mejor explicación la vais a tener en este vídeo que vais a ver a continuación, dentro de este mismo en el que me estáis viendo ahora. Es un libro para hacer recetas, ¿vale? No es una broma, es para hacer recetas. Aquí lo vais a ver a continuación. Es un libro que da una pasta increíble, muchísima pasta. No hace falta que lo compréis. De hecho, ya en el Facebook puse un enlace para que lo podáis descargar en PDF. Y si no, lo buscáis en Google o donde os dé la gana. Es fácil de encontrar. ¿Qué más os puedo decir? Pues que es una increíble y abominable realidad. Este libro existe y está creado por seres humanos. No sé qué más deciros sobre él. No sé qué opinión o qué conclusión sacaréis sobre él. Pero como mínimo tengo que poner en conocimiento, como hacemos desde la Comisión de Ciudadanos por los Derechos Humanos, para que la gente sea un poco más consciente de su hábitat, del medio en el que vive. ¿Quién lo gobierna? ¿Cómo lo gobiernan? ¿Cómo nos manipulan? ¿Y cómo nos esclavizan? Y además lo hacen con una facilidad increíble, porque la mayoría de la gente se presenta como voluntario para ser un esclavo. Algunos de ellos sobreviven medianamente bien, ¿no? Y otros no tanto, y muchos de ellos pues mueren. En fin, no me voy a enrollar porque en realidad la mejor explicación sobre este libro la tenéis aquí ahora a continuación, ¿de acuerdo? Besitos, abrazos, que la mejor medicina es el amor, ¿de acuerdo? Y la mejor ciencia no es la psiquiatría ni la psicología, es la paciencia, ya lo sabéis, ¿verdad? Bueno, era por decir algo así en plan cultural popular. Cuidaros, por favor, ser conscientes y contribuir a que nuestra gente sea mucho más feliz de lo que es, incluyéndonos a nosotros mismos, ¿de acuerdo? Tener cuidado con la farmacia, que está cada 4 manzanas, ¿de acuerdo? Cuidadín, cuidadín.
I was diagnosed with a chemical imbalance, manic depression.
They diagnosed me with having ADD.
He told me I had conduct disorder.
ADHD.
Mild depression.
Major depression.
Manic depressive.
Borderline personality disorder.
Compulsive
Social
disorder.
anxiety.
Depression and schizophrenia.
ADHD. Sleep disorder. Identity problem disorder.
But all of these so-called diseases are just made up. They're just fabricated. They're fictions of psychiatry imagination.
What would psychiatrists do without their labels? They couldn't pretend to be real doctors anymore, you know? Neither could psychologists, you know? Diagnosing, what a godlike thing to do. Making diagnoses, and here's your treatment, a pill. Because so far they're not proving that any so-called mental illnesses exist. These are labels, and that's all they are.
Pero sin pruebas no se puede tener credibilidad, así que los psiquiatras fabrican la suya.
It's based on a grab bag of checklists for disorders that are published in a book called the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. There are no statistics in this book, by the way. That just makes it sound more scientific.
They create this cluster of disease, and they get together and they vote. Is this a disease? All in favor, say aye.
The American Psychiatric Association is the publisher and owner and wealthy owner of DSM. They've made a great deal of money on DSM.
Desde la primera edición del DSM, los trastornos mentales que se votó incluir en el Manual de Diagnóstico de la Psiquiatría han crecido hasta 374. Y con cada nuevo trastorno, los psiquiatras crean otra forma de defraudar al público.
If you have 27 ways to bill in the DSM, that's 27 ways to bill. If you have 300, that's 300 ways to bill. So you can pretty much find anyone walking on the street that could fit into a DSM somehow.
When you build insurance companies, you can't say the word. You've got to send a number. And they have numbers for the most ridiculous things. Like arguing with your mother or peeing in the bed.
Adolescent rebellion disorder is an official psychiatric diagnosis. Arithmetic learning disorder is an official psychiatric diagnosis. General anxiety disorder is a recent diagnosis.
The psychiatric industry takes advantage of that. They say, wow, we can get these things categorized, make it look scientific, so let's label everything. Now we have a label for it. We can put a coding. If you've ever seen a medical insurance form, everything has a code.
In DSM, it just looks like sort of some magical numbers. Of course, what we're talking about is reimbursement for mental health treatment as an illness.
The more types of codings, the more types of illnesses you can come up with, the more claims can be paid, and the more reasons for treatment, and the more reasons for revenue for the psychiatric establishment, for the hospitals, and of course, the pharmaceutical companies.
Aunque parezca increíble, mientras presentan el DSM al mundo como hecho científico, los psiquiatras admiten tranquilamente su absoluta falta de base científica.
We have no diagnostic reliable markers for almost any illness there is in the DSM.
What we're testing for in psychiatry, it's hard to say because there's nothing specifically.
But as far as a test that's clinically useful, basically we're not there yet.
We don't have any laboratory tests that we can use to determine whether somebody does or doesn't have a mental illness.
There are no good biological tests for detecting mental illness.
There is no test, there's no biopsy you can do.
There is no chemical test right now.
There are no specific tests to confirm the diagnosis or show the improvement, like any blood tests or any x-rays or anything like that.
Oh, in my practice, I don't do any tests. I just speak with people and listen to them, and then I make a decision in what kind of illness.
Estos diagnósticos varían tanto como los psiquiatras que los hacen. En estas secuencias tomadas con una cámara oculta, una persona visitó a varios psiquiatras quejándose de los mismos síntomas.
I'm extremely unorganized, and I didn't used to be. It's caused problems in the family. It's caused problems getting, I'm self-employed.
You got ADD, ADHD, and you're depressed, and your depression is bipolar depressed.
You have a brain chemistry disorder, and it's probably genetic.
You have a lot of the symptoms of depression.
So it seems like it is a mixed picture. What that means is like we got some depressive symptoms and some, high symptoms.
If you're bipolar, I'll need to give you a mood stabilizer. We don't know, I kind of doubt it.
It's considered low-grade bipolar.
You are more of the ADD than ADHD.
And as far as medications for depression, because I would recommend that you start a medication, which are Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, Celexa.
Usually Focalin XR is pretty good.
They'll give you some Lexapro in the morning and some trazodone at night.
Lamictal is a better medication for that. It works on your depression also.
But the treatment for any bipolar cycling is the same. The lithium.
Remeron is another one.
Trazodone.
Tegretol.
Depakote.
Lobotrin.
Lexapro.
Lamictal.
Equitroid.
Depakote.
Lithium.
Ambien.
You may need an antidepressant also with your Lamictal.
We don't know if I give you a medication if it is going to work or not.
To a certain degree, it's trial and error.
You never know if it's the right drug.
How many people have I cured? Well, there are no real cures right now in psychiatry.
I have cured none of my patients.
We're always challenged by our lack of knowledge.
I mean, in fact, we don't know what the causes of mental illness are.
Most mental illnesses, we do not know the cause.
Of course, it would be nice to know exact reasons of disorders, but maybe in the future.
I'm the Director of Research at the American Psychiatric Association. We don't know the etiology of really any of the mental disorders at the present time.
DSM-5 is coming out. It's grown to 10 times its original size, and it labels everybody. I could find 5 diagnoses that would fit you or anybody else.
Compara esto con los métodos de investigación de la patología. Una ciencia real que descubre enfermedades reales usando una amplia variedad de test de diagnóstico precisos.
We do millions of laboratory tests as well as the structural examination and the microscopic examination. It's a whole series of applied scientific procedures. In the case of psychiatry, there isn't any laboratory tool that can precisely identify a psychiatric disease and allow it to be classified.
It's not as if there's some study of tissue or some study of the body or some study of matter. These are all categories which are made up. They're simply made up. They don't exist in nature. They're decided upon by psychiatrists and voted on.
Los psiquiatras no son los únicos que se benefician con el DSM. Siempre que se encuentre un diagnóstico psiquiátrico, se encontrará una droga psiquiátrica.
The pharmaceutical corporations now contribute enormous sums of money for the education of psychiatric residents and for the support of research by their professors, so that psychiatry today has become in America, has become very largely learning of which drug to use with which disease or disorder.
This to me is completely unethical, untenable, unacceptable for this to occur. The web of money is all over the place. It has compromised psychiatry, and now it's compromising psychology, and worst of all, it's compromising the patients.
En el año 2006, un estudio reveló que el 56% de los psiquiatras que decidían qué trastornos incluir en el siguiente DSM tiene lazos financieros con al menos una compañía farmacéutica. Hoy vemos las consecuencias. Un aluvión de drogas, cada una dirigida a un trastorno inventado que está apoyado por un diagnóstico arbitrario en el DSM.
The fact that it is couched in the language of science without necessarily having any of the scientific data or underpinnings to justify it is as threatening as anything we've seen today.
Y el último y más caro ardid para engañar al público al imitar a la medicina legítima. Escáneres del cerebro.
We can scan all the brains we want to. The fact that we see changes in different people's brains, changes in functioning, doesn't mean that we've discovered anything that has its origin in the brain. It just means that we're seeing changes, but it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the brain.
They have no reliable measures about precise blood flow patterns for any of the psychiatric disorders using any of the scans.
It's marketing. This is marketing. This is not science. This is incredibly effective marketing. It has nothing to do with science.
Psiquiatras y psicólogos usan el DSM para etiquetar a 450 millones de personas en el mundo como enfermos mentales, un total igual a la población de Francia, Italia, Alemania, Canadá, Australia, el Reino Unido y Rusia combinadas. Mientras la venta de drogas psiquiátricas que trafican superó los 80.000 millones de dólares al año, los fondos de los gobiernos del mundo para esos pacientes le dan unos beneficios brutos a la psiquiatría de 250.000 millones de dólares al año. Y una gran parte de este dinero proviene del diagnóstico y de las drogas que se recetan a los más confiados y vulnerables.